Hello.
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 Oh, is that to me or to them?
No, I'm talking to them over your shoulder there behind you. Look, just move to the side a bit. I'm talking to them. Let me just talk to them. Hello. It's the Comedy Slab. It's Shane O'Connor. It's Adrian Lacey. It's comedy all the way for the next 45 minutes, or failing that, 3/4 of an hour. We will be talking to you about comedy because that's what we love. Every week we get together. I mean, not physically, but fistfulosopically, and we
Fistful of dollars.
Google it. If you can spell it, you win a prize. We get together and we chat about comedy. We'll pick a comedy alternately. I pick one week, he picks one the next. It was my turn to pick this week. I'll tell you what I picked in a moment, and it wasn't a pick of pickled peppers. I'll tell you that for nothing. Who do you think I am, Peter Piper?
You've been drinking.
Do I deserve a medal from the drawer for that one, don't I, really?
You do. Put your drawers away.
We will play you a couple of clips of the chosen comedy that we picked. I nearly led myself down a Peter Piper route again, but I'm not going to do that.
I used to understand this show until you started to explain it to me.
Yeah, and then at the end of it, we do this thing where we get a load of numbers out, but we'll tell you more about that in a minute or later, depending on how we're feeling. But before we're doing anything like that, it was, as I say, my turn to choose. I chose a comedy, a radio comedy called Hobby Bobbies. More of which in a little while, but if you want to go away and have a look at that before you do anything further, you're more than welcome. We'll sit here and wait for you while you listen to it for half an hour. Actually, no, we better carry on, hadn't we? It's not going to work.
Yeah, we had.
Comedy news, you spotted something rather interesting this week, didn't you, dear chap?
In fact, actually, I think I saw this more than a week ago. And I was trying to work out what the hook was, because it's about the authoritative guide to stand-up. And the headline on chortle.co.uk says, coming soon-ish. And indeed, it is very ish, because it's not out till December not next year, but 2023. But I think the hook now, if I've read it correctly, and there is a danger in, me trying to read anything correctly or trying to read, but I think it's getting the publicity now, A, because he's got a good PR, and B, because he wants us, that's the general populace, and I am generally populacey, that he wants us to take part in a survey on comedy. And there is a link, naturally enough, at chortle.co.uk. Just go to that headline, coming soonish, the authoritative guide to stand-up. He is a guy called Oliver Double.
Both of them.
So sometimes you've got to do the obvious gag, but get in quick. He's a stand-up turned comedy researcher, so that's an interesting career progression.
Can I do, because you seem to have a better grip of this.
I wouldn't say that.
Than I do. You've got it kind of firmly by the throat. As a concept, as a story, this book that he's writing.
This book? Did you say it disparagingly?
You seem to have a better handle on what it's all about. I'm even less certain of what the hell's going on when you've got to fill in this. What's the survey about then? Does it say what the survey?
Well, I think the survey, I can only assume, but again, there is, as I say, a danger in me having not spent hours studying it, but he says, the idea is that comedians can provide short one-sentence answers. So it looks like, sorry, I said general populace. It looks like he's encouraging comedians to provide short answers to one or more of the questions in the survey. As I say, there's a link at Chortle. It's the sort of thing that should only take 5 minutes to do. So rather than listen to us.
Unless, if you're not a comedian, you'll have to go out and learn to do that first.
Well, that could take years if you're going to do it properly.
Then get a few gigs and then come back and fill in the survey. So it could take you longer than just, 5 minutes, couldn't it?
You might be back in time for the 10th edition of what is. Now, he's worked this one out. I'm not sure if our legs are being collectively pulled here. He's based at the University of Kent, but he's editing the Cambridge Companion to Stand-Up Comedy. I mean, is that surreal, or is that just wrong footing us?
That's Kent Polytechnic, isn't it? University of Kent, isn't it? As was.
Stop it. You're going back 100 years. I went to the University of London, where it used to be London Poly.
Oh, good.
I can wait.
Good. I like that. That's good. That's good. I don't know where you got it from.
And if you're under... I wrote it.
Get out.
So many years ago. Yeah. If you're under 55... Google it.
Yeah. Lumpoly, rather ungraciously, then went bust, didn't they?
Well, yeah, so you have to be pretty ancient to remember them. And of course, they'd have gone bust anyway in the pandemic, I would have thought, with all the travel trauma.
You know, you're talking about this, what's the hook to all this? And it was quite interesting. I'm reading one of David Mitchell's books at the moment, one of his collection of...
Can't you get your own?
Yeah, well, he lent it me.
Oh, you mean a copy of it?
If he's going to leave it lying around, it's his own fault, isn't it, really? And it's his collection. He writes articles in one of the newspapers. I can't remember which one it is. Can you remember which one he does? Is it the...
probably the one you hate the most, which is my lot. Or
no, it's not the Observer
/ Guardian.
No, it's...
well, he did.
Is it the Observer or the Observer book?
Well, the Observer is
Boys?
under the umbrella of the Guardian.
Anyway, the point was, and this is what jogged my memory, is that the stuff that he writes about, I just basically... Do you remember when we both worked in radio and you used to get offered these really rubbish press releases saying that, I don't know, some bloke's writing a book about comedy and he's available for interview. And he kind of, like all these survey type of things, that's where he gets that's what he writes about. All of the stuff that he's written, all these like essays, whatever you call them, these articles... I just rip-offs of these shoddy press releases, which I kind of thought that's quite interesting that they find their way to such heady heights as his intellectual furrow. Strange, anyway. But yeah, I think this is one of these kind of things, isn't it, where anyone who's short of material would think, oh, this is a great idea. I don't really know what is the. I mean, what's your understanding of the finished product of this book? Well, it'll be it's like
a reference guide,
a manual how to be a comedian, like a Haynes guide to being a comedian.
No, not how to be a comedian, but I would say for anyone interested in comedy, and obviously people in the business of comedy are, one imagines, automatically interested. Yeah. Although they might there might be that thing, well, I knew that already, tell me something else I don't know. But I'm sure it will, because people can't be across every area of comedy, because it's so wonderfully diverse. I think anyone could learn something from it.
Or if you don't like diversity, it could be so horribly diverse, couldn't it?
Well, yes, in the interest of your wonderful BBC-friendly balance, yes, some people will like the diversity of it, and you might feel threatened by that.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people who secretly don't like a lot of things, diversity being one of them. They think, well, actually, I don't like there being, I don't know, a diverse choice of draft beers when I go into my local pub. I like it to be, it's too much choice. The diversity frightens me. And I can understand that being a problem for people. So we just always assume that diversity is a wonderful thing in any form and we love it.
It's obviously more complicated than a couple of balding comedy reviewers can get into here.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway, the real killer on this one is that this book is going to be £75. And I don't mean in weight.
No, not cheap. So that doesn't allow for a diverse range of
prices,
buyers, does it?
No.
Can we have? Well, there's between $28.99 and $75. Anyway, once again, the gentleman's name is Oliver Double. That's why I did it twice. And hold your breath till December 2023. Maybe there'll be little teasers along the way. I'm sure there will be. And if you're a comedian, do fill in that survey. As I say, you can find a link via chortle.co.uk.
I've got to say, having you sold it to me, and having seen all the information, it makes me want to rush out to my local library, tell them to order it, and I'll get it out for the price of a library ticket. You know, I make £75. Are they having a giraffe?
Yeah, you're going to cripple your local library. If your library shuts, that will be the reason.
Can you cripple a library?
Well, I'm sure you'll give it a go. Anyway, should we put something on the comedy slab that isn't our frail egos?
Oh, go on then. Hobby Bobbies, BBC Radio 4. It's a Top Dog production, although it didn't say. I'm assuming it is.
I thought it said BBC Studios production.
Oh, maybe it is. I assumed it was a Top Dog production because it's on their website and listed as one of the things that they produced. So,
well, maybe they did it under the umbrella. It's
more.
It's a few years old, though, isn't it?
2014.
Yeah, which
13.
It might have been a slightly different credits in them days.
Yeah, 2013 was the first series anyway. And it is written by Dave Lamb, who we mentioned last week is the acerbic voiceover that does the Come Dine With Me narration, and him sort of verbally kicking Seven Shades out the contestants. Have you ever watched Come Dine With Me, by the way? Is that one of the programs was that one you ever sat down and watched?
I think I've seen enough to, being the Unitarian I am, just to get the formula. I did actually know someone who was on it, Bill Buckley.
Oh, yeah, Bill Buckley, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fellow Channel 5 announcer. And in fact, years ago, I worked with him when he was on, of all things, Esther Ranson's That's Life.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Remember him?
But he won at least one series. In fact, I went round to his for dinner and I could tell why, because he put the effort into cooking.
I thought you said I could tell why, because when I went round for dinner, there was a camera crew there and he wasn't even on the show that week.
Anyway, I remember that totally. We went round the corner. He lived then in, I don't know if he still does, probably does, in Vauxhall in London. There was a wonderful Portuguese restaurant not too far away.
I was kind of I don't know why, but I sort of, when I think about Come Dine With Me, I always think it's a bit low rent for you, really. But
well, I did only watch the one, darling, and I had a shower straight away.
I was a little bit sick, and then went and had a shower. Anyway, this Hobby Bobbies is about police community support officers, PCSOs, and it's written by Dave Lamb, and what can I tell you? It stars Richie Webb, who more of a little bit later, Nick Walker, Sinead Keenan, Chris Emmett. That's a name from the past. The one and only inimitable Noddy Holder. It's Christmas. He did that once, did he? Didn't do it once. And in this, Leon Herbert as well. Before we dip in and have a listen, tell me, dear boy, tell me your thoughts when I whopped it on the slab.
Once I'd worked out or reminded myself what a Hobby Bobby was. Well, actually, I was very old school, wasn't I? I mentioned special constables, but actually it's about CPSOs.
PCSOs.
Sorry. So, yeah, all the right letters, not necessarily the right order.
CPSO was the tall robot in Star Wars, wasn't it?
R2-3PCO. H2O. He was drowned in the end. What did I think of it? I think I was a bit confused as to what it was, but I guess from the sound of it, it's not going to go for the meaning of life type seriousness. And I don't mean the Monty Python film necessarily, although that was hinting at serious things. 6:30 Radio 4, fairly light and fluffy, which is not to necessarily disparage.
Shall we have some clippage? And then we can let everybody in on the secret. I was going to say let everybody in on the joke, but let's not rush to judgment. On that one. Two of our main characters, Geoff and Nigel, are out on patrol. I have to say that I think that, and I only got this from the blurb, that Nigel is supposed to be Britain's longest serving CPSO. And Geoff is supposed to be the laziest, and and hilarity ensues. That's the whole idea of it. So Geoff and Nigel, anyway, they're out on patrol and they come across what they think is possibly some criminality.
Geoff, I can smell crime. Finish your 99, please.
Come on, Nigel, you've only had the flake.
Look, just get on with it. Finish your ice cream.
All right. Gone. Oh, brain freeze!
Geoffrey, a little bit of professionalism. Crime is upon us. Look.
What, the lady with the sandals?
Just behind her.
The fella walking his cat?
No, the youths, Geoffrey, at the bus stop. Since when did teenagers ever use a bus stop to wait for a bus?
Well, they're not doing anything wrong.
Au contraire. They're 14 years old? Several of them are smoking and... there's a 2-litre bottle of cider on the go.
Oh, come on, we've all been there. If they whip out a tube of glue, we'll wander over.
Geoffrey, how on earth can we expect to progress to the police force proper with an attitude like that?
Don't tell me you've never sniffed glue.
I have never sniffed glue. I've drunk Tipex. But that wasn't for pleasure. Dave Almond made me do it.
Hilarity ensues, as you say. I think you have to tune in. It sounds to me, you're giving too much away, unless you're going to totally wrong foot me, that you weren't best pleased with this, to kind of Dan Maskell type phrase. Dan Maskell, Wimbledon commentator, when John McEnroe, I think, was very clearly visually swearing at himself and at the umpire. And Dan just said with his trademark whistle, I don't think he's best pleased with himself. Were you best pleased or least pleased?
I don't know. I kind of came away having had a funny relationship with the whole thing, really.
I thought you were going to say having a queer turn.
It's... Oh,
well, do you want a headline?
I was going to say, don't wrong foot me like that. No, come on.
I did wrong foot you like that. You sounded like a special constable. I've been thinking about it, and I'm not doing too well. I came up first with blobby, blobby, blobby. That doesn't really tell you much, does it? You might read a bit between the lines. No, it wasn't truncheon meat. That's true. Let's not meet truncheons. Oh, I don't know. But then I've got into this habit of thinking of the headline too early, and actually, with the second listening, I was warming to it. So I don't know what it'd be. A nice warm helmet. Leave it. I warmed to Dave Lamb's helmet.
No.
Have I got to stop now?
No, stop right there. That's enough.
Okay.
Here's the thing now. It's funny you say that, because that really resonated with me then when you said that you kind of made your mind up, and then on the second listen, it kind of softened you up a bit. There is something about this. Would you say, first of all, that this is old school radio comedy?
Yeah. I mean, the fact of the subject matter at all, it's Keystone Cops, isn't it, for supposedly the 21st century, but it might as well be the early 20th century.
Yeah.
It's doing a job. It's very gaggy. You know, what we're going to do, criticise the show, me having banged on about smile comms for months, and then I suddenly criticise something because it's very gaggy and lots of people are laughing and enjoying it.
Although, I mean, the audience sounded a bit. Do you know? I mean, I've got no experience of how they ticket these things. When they ticket them, do they try and target an audience? Do they kind of think?
Yeah. It depends entirely. I mean, we're obviously pre-pandemic a number of years.
Yeah.
With this, so that was under normal circumstances. You get a chance on the BBC shows and audiences sub website. What's it called? Microsite? I never quite know. Anthracite? Anyway, you get a chance to tick boxes of what you're interested in, the genres. And then I imagine it's all done with an Ernie-like computer, which crunches the numbers and then comes back with it. But some people don't express a preference, and if it's last minute, you're more likely to have to compromise on. You won't get the very hottest ticket in terms of the race for numbers. It doesn't mean you won't get. I always recommended people to go and see a brand new show, and then you can tell your grandchildren, I was at the first series of blah blah blah, and hopefully it becomes a big hit. You never know. And those ones, by definition, if they're starting out, they're not going to necessarily be such a hot ticket, particularly if they don't have big names in.
Although, I mean, if you say I was at the first episode of the first series of Mrs. Brown's Boys, you'd like to get a punch in the face, aren't you?
Well, only from you.
You shouldn't have laughed, should you? It's your fault that we've all got to sit through this.
Only encourages them.
Yes.
It's very ungenerous of you, but we expect that of you, don't we?
I'm only kidding.
Okay.
No, I just wonder whether people get letters saying, unfortunately, thank you for your application. Unfortunately,
on this occasion,
because you sent a picture of you wearing a cardigan, you can't come to see 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, please.
I thought you were going to say a picture of you with a warm helmet, but we'll leave that
because you're too old. The reason I ask is because, I don't know whether this is like a weird thing to say in itself, but when the audience were laughing, they said it quite old. They said it like it was like,
well. That's perfectly possible, and it's not actually illegal just yet to be more mature.
Thank God. Otherwise, we'd all be in trouble, wouldn't we? We'd all be down the nick.
You would.
Yeah, and I just, it was just that, I'm not sort of drawing any conclusions from that. I'm just saying that's what it said. I think I was actually highlighting the fact that I felt that the gags were kind of very old school as well. They were very, they weren't cutting edge stuff, were they?
Well, it made me think. I tell you what I was thinking this afternoon. It's always dangerous to think in the afternoons. I don't normally do that, but it is that day of the week. And I thought, there'll be kids listening to this who then, a small percentage who get really excited about comedy and go on to do something related to it, or like me working broadcasting. It made me think of me being a kid listening to the Men from the Ministry.
Yeah.
I think even then I wouldn't have thought necessarily it was the world's best show, but it just inspired me. It was just a different window on the world. It was, I was going to school, so it was a different world it introduced me to. And it still fascinated me because it was the radio, steam radio.
Like I say, whether that's a bad thing, it's interesting because I mentioned Chris Emmett, who's in this. And the other sort of reference I had was I remember as a kid lying in bed listening to the news headlines.
All right.
On Radio 2 was it 10 o'clock on a weekday and on a Thursday night?
It used to be many moons ago before it moved to Saturday.
And I used to love that, and I can't remember a single line from it. I can't remember a single character. I can't remember anything, and I don't really remember laughing at it. But again, it was that lying in the dark listening to the radio. Magic.
Was it a bit subversive? Were you not meant to? Did your folks disapprove?
No, not at all. In fact, I had, and God, I wish I'd have kept it because it was a beautiful piece of furniture as well as a gorgeous sounding bit of equipment. We had a radiogram, and we moved it upstairs, and I had it in my bedroom, and it was one of those, where it was like a bureau where you pulled down it was like a desk as well. You pulled down the thing, and inside was the turntable and that. But the radio was on the right hand side, and it all lit up. And
all lit up.
Yeah, the whole thing lit up, and it was gorgeous. It was.
Did it have Hilversum and Munich?
Yeah, and Helsinki.
Well, one can only assume that might well be Dave Lamb's reference points, and maybe he swore to himself as a kid that he would write one of these shows one day. In which case, he wasn't looking to create the next new genre or have alternative comedy version 3.0. Can I just say, Chris Emmett, it was driving me nuts actually, but I didn't get round to looking it up, was one of the voices on Spitting Image.
That's right.
First time round, back in the late 80s into the early 90s, if memory serves. What kind of voices was he doing? It sort of came to me and it sort of didn't.
I don't know. I'd have to check it out. I'd have to look that up. I'm not really quite sure.
I should have done. I wasn't sure if I sort of heard politicians. It wasn't Thatcher, was it? Because was that Enright-L, did we say? Or Steve Nallen?
Steve Nallen, wasn't it?
Steve Nallen, right.
Another Brummie, Steve Nallen, I've interviewed him. I did wonder what he does these days, because he used to do the whole shtick, didn't he? He'd dress up as her and put the wig on and do the whole...
Well, I remember him appearing on... either radio or TV at the end of Thatcher's reign, saying, "What are you going to do now?" So, and that's an awful long time ago, isn't it? 1990.
Yeah.
I was working on Newsnight for a while, and they were going to get Rory Bremner on one night I'm afraid I can't remember the story, but he phoned up. Stop me if I've told you this before, dear listener. He phoned up. I was the one answering the phone because that was my main gig, sort of office type work at that stage before I moved more into journalism. And he said, it's Rory Bremner here. Thank you very much for the invite, but unfortunately I can't appear tonight. So it was just he was too busy. And I said to him, I must have done it very deadpan. I said, "How do I know you're not impersonating Rory Bremner?" And so then, to prove he was Rory Bremner, he did Tony Blair. My head was reeling for months afterwards. The guy proves himself to be who I've joked that he might not be by doing someone else.
So hang on a second, that doesn't prove you're Rory Bremner, does it?
Well, it could have gone on a long time, couldn't it?
Yeah. You see, you could be Steve Coogan now. I don't know, do I? That's ridiculous.
Could be Steve Nallen.
Yeah. All right. Noddy Holder. What do you make of his appearance in it?
Well, what's not to like? I mean, I'm afraid he is saddled, whether he likes it or not, with the label, for me at least, National Treasure. And I think he's been saddled with that, although I didn't necessarily know the moment he looked down the barrel of the lens on top of the pop singing Merry Christmas, Everybody, which is about 153 years ago. And he just doesn't seem to be able to put a foot wrong in the sense that he, there's been no scandal about him. There's been no sort of any negative press that I'm aware of. Of course, it's now a challenge to try and find some, but no, it just seems almost too good to be true. Nice guy. I love that voice. And he's turned up it's Walsall, isn't it, to 12. What saddened me was to think he's actually playing a guy in an old people's home, but on the upside, he's still working and he's still recognisably him, and he's using that wonderful voice. So rather that than not working.
He's always had a passion for it. Well, I mean, he's like to dabble. I mean, I just looked at some of the stuff he'd done. He had a cameo in Coronation Street. He had a proper role in The Grimleys. I don't know if you remember that with, I think it was with Brian Conley and Amanda Holden, I think, that rings a bell. Mm-hmm. He actually had a walk-on in Max and Paddy, which we slabbed a little while ago. And I think he also played himself in the Brian Pern spoof documentaries. So he likes to get out and do a bit. I mean, I thought he was a little bit wooden, wasn't he? Don't you think?
Well. No, I felt he fitted in with the style of the show, which was very theatrical. It's a bit like we were talking a few weeks back about Third Rock from the Sun. Yeah. Absolutely huge performances. So to sing It's Christmas at the top of his lungs wouldn't have been out of place, apart from it not being Christmas. That sort of size performance, reaching the gods.
Although
it didn't worry me.
I kind of struggled to release the Noddy that I knew and loved and embrace him as what was he, assistant inspector?
I had it down here. So he was in a home for retired police men and perhaps women. It was called Dun Nicking.
I mean,
what a lovely gag.
It's old though. I mean, it is not old in terms of like hackneyed, but like it's old school
style. Yeah, but it knows it is. It's like people having classic furniture. You can tell them, well, there's a new stuff now, and they say, yeah, we know, we didn't want it, we like this one. He was it chief superintendent, and he's amongst retired inspectors.
That's right.
The big question for me, though, is before we get to our second clip, although actually remind me, the second clip might be about this. Actually, no, shall we do the second clip? Because it is nod at the top, isn't it?
Yes.
Give me a nod at the top.
I'll give you the nod.
And we'll talk about the dilemma or I want people to think, is this credible? Considering he's an old copper and his son is not so old. What's it again?
PCSO.
ECPC.
C3PO.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah. All right.
What was the second thing?
Second clip then. Geoff goes off to visit his dad, which is Noddy Holden, of course, in his care home. And he's been mulling on the fact that his dad has been mulling on the fact that Geoff is a big disappointment to him. Not least the fact that, he's not a fully fledged copper. But he's been mulling this over, and he thinks he finally knows why he's such a disappointment.
After a great deal of soul-searching, I've realised that this whole mess of a father and son relationship is your fault.
Why?
Because you never once had the guts to stand up to me. So I'm going to teach you how.
I don't get it, Dad.
You are going to have a second crack at adolescence. And this time round, you have to beat me.
What?
When I sent you to your bedroom for 7 years, you should have snuck out, met girls and grown up. Instead, you had the mother of all lions. This time round, you have to fight back.
So you want me to, defy you and that?
Yes! It's a shame I had to give you permission to do it, but that's exactly what I want you to do.
OK, then.
So, go for it.
Right. Let's do this, you idiot.
It's a good start. I mean, it's laughable, but you're new to it.
So yeah, my question is about credibility, and I don't know that I've even answered it for myself, because we're obviously in a larger than life world. It's just how much larger than life it is, and how much, given that it's a traditional style of sitcom, as we're saying, and really the types of gags, I think we're saying, could be anything up to 50 years old in terms of structure. Does that fit with the idea that a retired copper wants his son to be more of a rebel? I mean, that's just it's like trying to get my head round Rory Bremner and Tony Blair again. So you've got a copper telling his copper son, who hasn't achieved highly enough, he's only going to achieve highly enough if he becomes more rebellious and criminal, in effect. Do we buy that, or is that too convoluted, or is it really very creative?
I mean, they lost me in terms of credibility at the very near the start, where Nigel, I thought the character of Nigel was very overplayed. He's the straight-laced one, isn't he, Nigel?
Yeah.
And they had to go and see their boss. He said, the Gov wants to see us. And then he goes to the office. The Gov. You wanted to see us, the Gov? And I just thought, oh, no, don't do this. And it kind of, that sort of then set the tone for me, really, in terms of believability. And I think by that, you're right. And I think by the time that came around for me, I'm afraid that particular horse had already left the stable. But it's difficult. I think, in a way, and I only know this because I've seen it done, I think that they missed a trick in what they did, or Dave Lamb missed a trick in what he did. I don't know if have you seen the sketch that Mitchell and Webb did of the PCSO and the police officer out on patrol together?
No, I'm laughing already, having not seen it.
David Mitchell is the police officer, and Robert Webb is the PCSO.
It would have to be that way round, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and they're walking down the street, and David Mitchell just apropos nothing, they're just walking, not even looking at each other, and he doesn't look at him, and he just says, "I hate you." And and Robert Webb is like a kind of like real sort of puppy dog sort of character, and he's trying to curry favour with him. Yeah. And he said, and David Mitchell swears, and he said, well, there's no need to flipping swear. And he said, yes, you're right. He said, choosing your words carefully. He said, because if you swore, I could arrest you and you couldn't arrest me. And there's this whole dynamic about you're not a proper policeman and all the rest of it. And I thought that rather than this kind of idea of the longest serving and the laziest, would have been a greater dynamic, don't you think? But like I say, I'm not being clever. I only know it because I've seen somebody else think of it.
Yeah. I take all of that. And I mean, we're back to good old status games, and so much of comedy is about status, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would have been a bit more sophisticated and would probably have had much more mileage, instead of which we kind of got the radio equivalent of slapstick, haven't we, really? Again, it's not to write off the whole of slapstick, and that's not a particularly good analogy. The thing that comes to me is Salman Rushdie, and you might think that's not an obvious read across.
What? He didn't write comedies, did he? Did he?
Not as far as I know. It's not known for a huge sense of humour. I mean, he has a subtle intellectual sense of humour. But I'm lucky enough to have a wonderful brother who bought me a subscription to Masterclass. You've seen those adverts on YouTube or whatever. And Salman Rushdie does one of these masterclasses, and he gets a bad rap for coming across as snobbish and over-intellectual and all of that, but he's absolutely brilliant in these little installments, how to write novels. And one of the things he says, and I just love it because it's effectively saying, well, no, I'll say what he says first, and then I think people will work it out immediately. He says, there's loads of books out there. If your book doesn't need to be written, please don't write it. And it's like there's loads and loads of police dramas, comedies, you name it. It's a massive staple. It's a go-to theme from Line of Duty to, as I say, Keystone Cops, or not necessarily in that order. If you don't need to write it, if you haven't got anything new to say, please don't bother. And there's a bit of me, okay, there's a less generous part of me than I want to admit to, which says, did he really need to bother? Maybe for him, he needed to write it, which is fine. And it's perfectly professional. And some people, maybe many people will enjoy it. But
the problem
part of me thinks there's nothing new here.
But the problem with Salman Rushdie's rationale is that the person least placed to make that call is the person writing it, isn't it? I mean, presume that by the very virtue, you know, I mean, you've done serious writing, and by the very act of sitting down and committing yourself and committing your time to do the writing, you've got to think it's. I mean, this is not a whim, is it? This is not something that you think, oh, okay, I'll have a bit of a tinkle at it. This is something that has taken time for him to craft.
Yes,
particularly on your own. I mean, I have to say as well, for him to write a comedy on his own is quite an achievement in itself, isn't it? I mean, the reason that so many are written with partners is because it is easier to write it that way.
Yeah, and bounce off each other, and you make each other laugh. And well, I speak with someone who you've sort of hinted at it. Maybe now I can actually confess, because this weekend I are possibly going to cross the threshold in my first novel, first draft of 100,000 words. And I can't believe I've got here. But
fantastic. If you'd have only chosen more than 2 different ones, it would have been brilliant.
And put them in the right order as well.
Oh, man.
It would have been more interesting. Maybe the second draft will have more words.
But that's my point, isn't it? I mean, that is my point. Is that you know, how many people can honestly say they've ever sat down and written anything of that volume?
Well, coming back to our old friend Salman Rushdie, he says writers are people who finish books, and comedy writers are people who, like Dave Lamb, actually don't say, oh, one day I'm going to write it. They actually do the hard graft.
Yeah.
And there were some interesting creative things in here. Nice little callbacks. He clearly knows what he's doing and the structure. Well, you know, I return to it. Okay, we're saying it's old school, obviously, but it's professional. It notwithstanding some of our reservations, it at least sits as a professional body of work, and it's for their, you know, as if my book ever gets published, it's out there in the public domain eventually, and people can love it or hate it, but at least the person had the courage to do it.
Oh, I mean, this is where you and I differ, is about the, you know, knowing the structure and writing them to a structure. I always think that, and it's the same with music, that if you detract from that, from the perceived wisdom, very often that's where genius comes from. And you know, but I hear what you're saying, is that there is a structure, there is a formula, there is a way of writing these things, and particularly with comedy, it's something we've been accustomed to. If you don't write it like that, it then sounds weird.
There's a bit of there was. Again, I don't want to be too cruel to it, because it's got its place, hasn't it? There was a heart sink moment right at the top with the largeness of the first line. I thought, oh, right. But it set the tone. At least you could say, well, it's that genre. It's going to be played that big throughout. And it blooming well was, wasn't it? But it's not really my cup of tea. So that and it's sounding like it's not yours either.
No, I think it's fair enough to say. I have to mention, though, Richie Webb. It's a guy I came across through children's television, believe it or not. He'd written, I can't think for the life of me what it was, but I saw, or I heard rather, a theme tune and thought, what a great tune that is. I wonder who wrote it. And then looked it up, and it took me into this wonderful world of this guy called Richie Webb, who I think has got a studio down in Warwickshire Way, just south of where I am. And he actually has got a production company with Dave Lamb, and that's why I say Top Dog Productions produced, does, according to their website, has produced other comedies as well. Produces comedies for Radio 4, but he's a fantastic songsmith. He's incredible. He's he's a composer. He does all the tunes for Horrible Histories.
Oh, right, which I think is a very strong part of them, a strong part of their strong appeal.
Yeah. I did threaten it at the start. I think we've reached the point where we need to stick some numbers on it.
So I'm going to give it 3 actually, because I kind of know that's probably a tad more than my inner world might want to give it, but I would rather err on the side of generosity, because I don't want shows not to be made. It's a good thing when a new show is made and someone does something for the first time as well and gets something off their chest or whatever. And I think it's well enough made and performed. 3 out of 5 from me.
All right, it's a 2 for me, I'm afraid. Just below halfway. 2 out of 5, and in the same way, I don't wish it any malice, and I think it comes from a good pedigree, and I'm guessing this is the first thing that Dave Lamb has written. I'm not sure whether he's ventured to do any more, but it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. So 2 out of 5 for me.
Giving it 50% marks.
Yeah,
5 out of 10. Right, to next week's homework. My turn to set yours, and I'm referring to listeners and to you. It depends how many shows of ours you've listened to, but if you listen to a few, you'll hear me name drop. Well, if I'm to ask Shane, I wonder if you can remember, I wonder if you've been listening to blind thing I say. If I was to ask you what you think my favourite show, or the show I worked on my sound tech days at TV Centre, BBC TV Centre in Shepherd's Bush, the show I was most proud to have worked on,
Blackadder.
Probably 2 or 3. Yes. So I thought, well, we haven't done it before.
Hang on.
Very good.
At least give
it's
us
like
a kiss
Mr.
on the
and
cheek.
Mrs.
What's the matter with you? Come on. Hey?
Which way am I going to go? If you're on a roll with guessing,
4.
which series do you think? 4. Okay.
Blackadder goes 4th.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And is it going to be?
Oh my God! Would you want episode as well?
Yeah. Is it going to be the obvious In at the Ground Floor?
No, it's going to be the last one.
Oh, well, it's between those two, and I was going to leave it possibly to you to decide, and then I'd probably find I would go against you. Which would you prefer? Which do you think our listeners would prefer?
Well, there is a nice little anecdote about the end of the last one, isn't there? I don't think we'd be breaking any confidences if we told that. I'm sure, but I don't mind. I mean. No, go on. I mean, I've had a good run guessing there.
Yeah, no, you've done well, but you fell at the last hurdle.
Oh, behave.
A bit like they did, really.
Because I didn't guess that you hadn't made your mind up. Okay.
We do sound like an old married couple.
Fair enough.
A very glum married couple. You don't want to choose then?
I'll do 6. Do 6.
We'll do 6. Okay.
Go on,
yeah,
do 6.
Final one. So, very happily, it's currently on Shane's favourite streaming service called BBC iPlayer.
Okay, good call, good choice. Don't forget, if you want to catch up with the Comedy Slab, we're all over the place. We're like a nasty rash that you just can't get rid of. Except that we're on digital platforms like Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, Spotify. There's a little thing happening on YouTube. There's a little corner of YouTube that is forever Comedy Slab. Well, for as long as we pay the.
Was that a deliberate First World War reference?
Yeah, do you like that?
Very good. Very neat.
I
like it. It was poetic, mate.
People think they throw this together, but we don't. We don't.
We just make it sound like we do.
And we're also on social media, aren't we, old boy?
Anti-social media, as I prefer to call it. My joke, and I'm going to keep peddling it. So we are on Twitter at Comedy Slab, and do please follow us there. Also, if you could like us on our Facebook page, which has the same handle, at Comedy Slab, that would be great. Personal recommendations or via Zoom, depending on the state of the pandemic and whether you can be bothered to leave the house. And they would be welcome too. Get the word out there, please, and we'll love you for it even more than we do already, and that's quite a lot. And finally, wait for it. That's all important. Apple Podcasts, iTunes. I nearly went into iHeart Radio there, but anyway, a generous star rating there and a little bit of a comment about how much you model your hairstyle on ours. And indeed, enjoy the Comedy Slab. Thank you.
or if you can actually remember how to leave the house, that's always a bonus, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's been quite
Which way to turn at the gatepost.
Well, that's it for us. Thank you very much for your company. I am going back to listen to this recording again just to actually dig into my consciousness that Adrian did actually do a joke about truncheon meat. And for all you kids out there, it was a play on words with a thing that we used to eat a long time ago called luncheon meat. That's luncheon meat. If you don't know what luncheon meat is, why don't you Google it?
Or look into your email spam.
Oh!